coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you, Barbara. Look, there comes one of them now.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Movie Breakdown, the podcast that at one time was a weekly show. Well, at one time it also had two hosts, but today you just have me, Christopher Spicer, and it has once again been a long time since you've last heard my dulcet tones on this podcast. Of course, longtime listeners knows that the Movie Breakdown's been around since 2013, and me and Scott on a weekly basis would discuss movies and discuss the hottest movie news. But the last few years, if you are a newer listener, you think it's a show that happens maybe once a year. And it's just me coming on and keep on promising it'll be weekly again, I promise, weekly again, I promise. But things have definitely changed. As you know, Scott Martin has taken a leave of absence from the podcast, and despite evidence, this is something that I want to keep going on a weekly basis. And the goal at this point, as I've said in previous shows, is to do it solo for a little bit as I seek out either a new host for the next little while or have a collection of guest hosts. But for now it will be solo until we really feel like, I get this back into the weekly groove. And yes, 2025 has definitely not been a great year for relaunching the Movie Breakdown, or a great year for sort of getting the Beyond the Balcony, my site, going, where I promised that I'd be reviewing weekly new releases, 2025 movies, and I haven't even seen one 2025 movie yet. And that is partly, as I had said in the previous show, if you remember that from many weeks back, part of it is this has been sort of a year where I have been going through sort of therapy and counseling to work through a lot of long time struggles with emotional health, which I've then learned through this process. A lot of it came from undiagnosed neurodivergence, autism, and ADHD, and not having the strategies in place for living my best self, for that idea of working with my brain rather than against my brain. There was decades of trying to fix myself or thinking I was broken, and it wasn't until this year I realized that's not the case. It is just, I'm wired a little bit differently. I am Windows 95 trying to run on a Mac type thing, and now learning to sort of try to work through that and to really take advantage of the strengths of my neurodivergence, which is sort of that creativity and seeing the world through a different lens, and that whole sort of the way I see patterns and the way that I connect, trying to take advantage of that, while also sort of managing the challenges that come with, the executive dysfunction and the struggles of focusing, and that sort of feeling awkward and seeing sort of simple tasks very differently than your typical neurotypical. And so just trying to balance all those struggles. And my plan is, with Beyond the Balcony and with the Movie Breakdown, is sort of exploring and embracing my neurodivergence and my differences, and sort of the things that come from that, be it the creativity, the storytelling, but most definitely sort of the empathy and sort of the justice, and how I view the world today, and how I want there definitely to be a more open-minded and loving and compassionate world. All those aspects, I want to bring that to this podcast, bring that to this site, through the lens of obviously reviewing movies and talking about movies. And that was something I talked a bit about on the last podcast, and that is something that I want to do. And I think one of the big challenges that I've had most of my life, and I know is realized sort of with that neurodivergence, is the all or nothing mentality, that idea that I want something that is perfect. I want what's in my head to completely come out and wow right away, and that is just not realistic. It's sort of, like I said, the all or nothing. And one of the big things that my therapist has been pushing is done is better than perfect. And so I'm trying to get over that hurdle and realizing I've got these big dreams for the podcast, big dreams for the site, big dreams for my career, big dreams for creative projects, and realizing rather than sort of being like, well, I can't really do this until everything is perfect and set, and realize it's better just to jump into it and embrace all its messiness. And so that's what this podcast is an attempt to once again get things going. And this is a show where I haven't really done a whole lot of preparation. It's just, let's get a show up again. And of course, this show is brought to you by Spreaker Prime, our amazing hosting site, which also has a huge collection of great podcasts you can check out, as well as Beyond the Balcony. It's been on my site since day one. And if you want to sort of help out the podcast, support it, you can consider listening to it through the Spreaker app, which is obviously brought to you by Spreaker. And so I've already admitted I have not reviewed or even watched any 2025 movies. I keep on saying I got to get into that mode. I got to be ready. And then once I start watching my first movie, I'm going to review it and then kind of jump on that choo-choo train of movie reviewing magic. And so I've kept on sort of pushing it off. And so I haven't done that. But hopefully starting this week, I will start finally catching up on those movies. I really got to watch that Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, with my kids. That is, I love Wallace and Gromit, and I feel like there's a good chance that could be one of the best movies I see of the year, so I can't avoid that one for much longer. But I did want to quickly look at the movies, some of the movies that came out this year that, I haven't seen, but sort of look at how they did in the domestic box office. And while I can't necessarily talk on their quality, sort of just look at sort of what is the state of movies and why I think some of these movies were sort of the big hits. I will say right off the bat that the number one movie of the year so far, a Minecraft movie, absolutely shocked me. Like, I've been talking about movies since 2013, and I've definitely got some of my predictions wrong in the past, but I think I have a pretty decent record when it comes to predicting stuff or seeing what is going to sort of resonate with an audience. I've been doing this long enough where I feel like I'm pretty good at that, but I completely was wrong on a Minecraft movie. Now, this was announced like years and years and years ago, and it's gone through a whole bunch of different writers and directors. And this to me always seemed like trying to jump on something that is popular without really having a good idea of what the story is, or something that is popular that isn't really designed to be a movie. I mean, the Minecraft game itself is not a narrative game. It doesn't really have a built-in sort of story. It's a building game. It's sort of an open world immersive experience, something that doesn't really lend itself to sort of a compelling movie. And so I thought this was just such a cash grab idea. I'll also admit that I thought the Lego movie was a horrible idea, and then I ended up loving that movie, and because they actually had an interesting story in there. And they did use sort of the idea of Lego, that idea of creativity, and the idea of sort of exploring what you can do with these blocks and using your imagination. And they turned it into an interesting movie. They took the themes of Lego and created it into something compelling with a great sense of humor. But you also had great directors there. A Minecraft movie, to me, I just felt like that's sort of what it was. Like, I think it got greenlit right around the time that the Lego movie was a hit, and I'm just like, can you really do that twice, and while I can't speak into its quality. My son Everett saw it and he enjoyed it well enough. I don't think it ended up being one of his favorites, but he liked it well enough. He said it was fine. Obviously, it connected with an audience. It is by far the biggest hit domestically with 423 million is what it's made so far. It's halfway to almost halfway to the $1 billion magic mark, but it's one of the easily the biggest hit of the year. And yeah, like I said, I saw this as a cash grab. I saw it as something that wouldn't necessarily connect with people. I mean, there is a history of that happening where you grab something that is popular and then it doesn't translate into a big box office hit. The Super Mario movie, the version of the 1990s, you have yourself, that was back when Nintendo was sort of at its height. It was a massive hit. People loved the Mario movie or loved the Mario games, but it didn't translate into a successful movie. I think one of the big things is that was one of those things where you got someone who created a movie that really didn't know anything about the game. It was not leaning into what it was that people loved about that game. I mean, the aesthetic, everything about it looked really almost nothing like Mario. And I think that was a big reason why it flopped. And where in this case, a Minecraft movie, it really did look like Minecraft. They were definitely trying to be faithful into what people loved about Minecraft. You made the Minecraft world look like what it does in the game, and the characters and the homes. I think also, even though we're in an era where movies aren't necessarily star driven anymore, I think there is an idea where people want to see certain actors in certain type of movies. And when you see that type of actor in that movie, it sort of cements that, okay, this is the type of movie that I want. And so Jack Black was sort of Jumanji, and being in recent sort of video game movies, Jack Black, I think, really was the right fit because people connect him to these type of movies. And so his humor and the fact that a lot of people like him, he is obviously, I think his casting helped sort of affirm that Minecraft was going to work. Another big thing is the movies in the last few years that have been major hits. I think there is sort of this idea of being part of a cultural zeitgeist, of it being a bit of an event. I think that's what the Barbie and Oppenheimer movies pulled off, and I think that's why those end up being a massive hit, is this idea that you need to be a part of something. It is something that is culturally relevant right now, and the Minecraft movie had a lot of these memes and a lot of these sort of there was these conversations around it, and there was almost a little bit of sort of this Rocky Horror aspect where the audience was interacting with this movie. And so again, it became a bit of a cultural zeitgeist thing. It became a thing where you need to be a part of the conversation. So you need to see this movie. And that's where we're at, is you want to create movies that seem to be a major part of the culture, that have maybe the inside jokes or the memes or something that is connected sort of with this online discussion, online world, part of the social media. And Minecraft is obviously, again, something where people will watch Minecraft videos, and they've connected that obviously with the movie and with that culture and with that sort of demographic. And so they were smart in how they did it with marketing and connecting that. And so I think that was a big reason why it was a major hit. The second highest grossing movie of the year is another one that I probably would have predicted to do as well as it did. But again, it sort of makes sense. And that's Lilo and Stitch. And I think part of that is, I think it's time for the studios to realize, like, we've leaned so much into the nostalgia of like the 90s and the 1980s in the last few years, but the Gen Z demographic, that age, the people who were growing up in the 2000s, it is not only a very large group of people, but that's really the last generation where going to the theater was sort of still a very major thing, a major part of people's sort of habits, and something that would still happen on several times a year. It was the last time before streaming became a major thing, and that streaming started kind of eating into sort of the movie going experience. The idea that you could easily watch movies at home, which is what would then happen with the next generations. This is the last generation where there would still be a heavy nostalgia to movie going in your childhood. And so, even though I think Disney saw Lilo and Stitch as a bit of sort of one of their throwaway things, not sort of a major priority as live action. Apparently, at one point, it was going to be on Disney Plus. I think Lilo and Stitch has a very special spot for that Gen Z, for those people who are growing up in the 2000s. That was their Disney movie. That is one of their all-time favorite Disney movies. That is something that is connected to their childhood. And so I think that is a major reason, because you now have the Gen Z where they have families now, they have kids. And so they very much, at least very young kids, they'd be very much wanting to take their kids and be able to live that experience of something from their childhood. That's something that, I mean, parents love to do. There's a reason why I showed my kids Indiana Jones and Star Wars. You want to share your childhood with your kids. And so I think that was a big strength of this Lilo and Stitch live action picture, is the fact that it came right out during a period where, even though that wasn't considered the height of Disney animation, the Disney Renaissance was over. The golden era of sort of the 1990s was done. And so Lilo and Stitch maybe wasn't seen on the same level of a hit with Disney. It is something that is cherished and treasured by people growing up in the 2000s. And also, it is pretty obvious that Stitch is someone who has really, that is a character that has really lasted and has connected, because, I mean, my daughter's birthday, not this year, but the year before, every present she got was like a Stitch in some form. And so clearly Stitch is someone who has endured. And so even now this younger generation has connected to Stitch. And so you've got a movie that really hit on many, many generations. And I think it has a bigger fan base than maybe a lot of people expected. And I mean, based off reviews, it's one of the better, more successful live action adaptations from their animated works. It seemed to sort of one that translated better and actually had something to say, which kind of leads to what is the 9th highest grossing movie this year, Snow White, which is another live action movie. And all the talk around that seemed to be that it was a massive flop. And I think with something where Disney made it with the idea of it being a big, massive blockbuster, there might be a little bit of disappointment of the fact that it didn't even break 100 million. It's at 87 million right now domestically. It's still one of those ideas where it's one of the top 10 grossing movies so far, and so that probably comes from a place of, in some ways, blockbusters were kind of getting out of hand with the production budgets, when something that almost makes 100 million is domestically, it's considered a flop, especially when they still made even more money when you go internationally. But I also think the Snow White dialogue, this idea of, I think a lot of the people who jumped on it being a flop are also sort of those, which I've talked a bit on this show in the past, is those sort of toxic commentators, those people who consider themselves anti-woke, those people who they were going to always frame the story that Snow White was a massive bomb because they didn't like the fact of who was cast, Rachel Ziegler cast as Snow White. They were opposed that from day one. They didn't like her politics. They didn't like some of the things that she said in the media. They also didn't like the fact that she wasn't Caucasian. There was a lot of things that they're pushing back with that Snow White movie. And so I think sometimes that narrative also just came from a lot of really negative commentators and podcasters and critics, people who sort of came out with their agenda no matter what. On the other hand, I mean, critics that I even respect really disliked Snow White, and it's probably hard to shake the fact that Snow White was more of a cash grab movie, and definitely you look at the dwarves and the CGI is looks like it's something from a horror movie. And so I'm not trying to 100% defend the movie, and I'm definitely at a time where I'm more than happy to say goodbye to live action remakes from Disney. But I do want to say that it's not like I am opposed to any type of remake, even when it comes to sort of Disney doing live action remakes. It's more for me that it comes to anything when you're taking something that's already a recognizable story, when be it a remake or a sequel or something based off a book, or returning to something like those legacy sequels. You think of something like a Creed. Ryan Coogler returned to the Rocky world because he had a story to tell. He had a story to tell, and then he went to the studio and says, I want to make this movie. And that's where I'd rather they approach sort of the live action remakes. As you look at something like a Treasure Planet, or you look at something like A Sword in the Stone or Aristocats. I'm trying to think of movies that they haven't turned into live action yet. And I'd rather there to be a director or screenwriter or some type of artist that they look at that and say, there's a new way of approaching that. I want to tell that story in a different way, or I'm looking at this and I'm passionate about a tale, and that's how you approach it, rather than Disney just saying, what do we have in the vault, and let's turn it into a movie. And I think the ones where it's obvious that the director had an actual story to tell, something where it was driven by that, you tend to have much better movies than, the case of something like the Snow White, where it felt like they were trying to just turn something into a movie where they can make a whole lot of money. I mean, I still stand strong on what I want to see as a live action remake is the Black Cauldron, because I think that would be really cool and immersive and evocative type of dark fantasy tale. I think there's at least like 3 or 5. It's a book series, and so there's a lot of other stories that they could still tell. Like, it doesn't even have to be a straight adaptation. You can go into that sort of book material and make something a little bit different, and not necessarily following the animated movie, but returning to that world with those villains and those creatures and those characters. I think would be interesting. It's also like Disney's biggest sort of box office flop during sort of their dark period. And so they're probably not that interested in returning to that movie. And so that's probably one of their less likely, especially since it would also require a pretty big budget to make it work. But that's what I'd be more interested in, is taking something that hasn't already told the story perfectly and take another stab at it, rather than these pictures that are already considered classics and then it sort of disappoints people. It's interesting that Captain America Brave New World is another one that sort of the dialogue around it was a flop, but we're looking now at it being right now domestically the 4th highest grossing movie of the year. And maybe that's part of a sign where the box office this year, it's only been very few movies that have really been sort of those breakout hits, and there's been sort of a lot of disappointing movies when it comes to the box office. There's been a lot of slow periods. I think the month of March was considered a real massive disappointment, where there's a lot of weeks where they made very little money at the box office, and that might be part of the reason why Captain America sort of is still one of the highest grossing movies, but considered disappointment. But I think part of it also is the fact that it sort of has the Captain America name behind it. But I also think we might once again have some of that sort of those agenda pushing commentators that were out to kind of get Captain America anyways, because of the fact that it's Anthony Mackie and not Chris Evans in the Captain America role. Though at the same time, I will be honest that none of the trailers for Captain America Brave New World really ever appealed to me. And the whole Hulk thing that they were sort of hyping up, it looked like a video game, basically. The Hulk wasn't all that thrilling to me. But it is interesting that Captain America sort of is in the fourth spot. It's considered a disappointment. Well, the dialogue around the Thunderbolts was that it was a hit box office wise, but it's actually number 5. It's below Captain America when it comes to box office grosses domestically. So I always find that fascinating that the thing that was considered the flop actually made more money than the thing that's considered a hit. Now, again, Captain America, you're looking at an established name, and there was 3 Captain America movies prior to this one, and so it is sort of, again, considered one of the high earning box office kind of pictures, franchises. This is something where it's considered a hit. Well, Thunderbolts, it's basically a collection of sidekicks, characters that were either they were only in kind of Disney Plus series, or they were a side character in a bigger picture, and they're all now put together as a ragtag group, and so it maybe didn't necessarily have the same kind of box office power, with Sebastian Stan probably being the sort of biggest name there, or maybe a Florence Pugh would be sort of your 2 biggest, and then Dave Harbour because of like Stranger Things. And so I think it's one of those ideas that maybe it was a gamble, sort of like Guardians of the Galaxy, like almost 10 years ago, and it paid off, and so that's probably why the dialogue kind of surrounded it being sort of a surprise hit. But I think in both cases, Marvel shouldn't be too upset with how it's done. I mean, Marvel, I think, is used to their movie being almost one of the highest grossing movies of the year. And at the end of the year, both these movies are going to either be sort of in the middle of the top 10 or at the bottom of the top 10, depending what movies end up being big hits at the second half of the year. So I could see in some ways where those are disappointments. We'll see how Fantastic Four does. That's the last Marvel movie. There's a chance that it could do better than both of these movies. But again, Thunderbolts, with it being sort of less kind of guaranteed hit kind of characters in it, I think, yeah, you could see it as a success. And so that's kind of the state of the Marvel right now. We're in a spot where Marvel, it's not a guarantee to be a big box office smash anymore with their movies. One of the things I'm really happy about in the number 3 spot is Sinners. One, because it's a horror movie that did really, really well. It's a movie directed by Ryan Coogler, who I'm a big fan of. But it's an original movie. It's not based off anything. And so it's evidence once again that if you have an intriguing, interesting, original story, it can still be a hit in the box office. And Sinners is a massive sign of a win for creativity, and this idea for studios to realize, it's okay to greenlight original movies and they can still be big hits at the box office. Not what Sinners was. Now, I also realize we're in a place where studios are willing to take original ideas on animated family movies. Those are ones where you still sometimes have pictures that are not based off something that's established, and then horror movies. Those seem to be the two genres where they kind of allow you to come up with something original and they still think it has a chance of being a box office hit. And that's not necessarily the case in sort of any other genre, which is disappointing. But the good thing about Sinners is it's not sort of pure horror. And so that would be one area where I would consider, another area where I consider Sinners a big win is the fact that it wasn't a jump scare movie. It wasn't just sort of a pure throwaway horror picture. This is one that it had the slow build. It was having a clear story to tell. It has horror elements in it. It obviously has vampires, but it was trying to say something about society today. It was exploring themes. It was dramatic. And that type of picture, despite what certain groups would tell you, resonate with audiences. And it was a huge hit. And so this is, once again, sort of encouraging sort of horror type stories that are more than just being jump scares. Just real great, intriguing, exciting type of horror movies. Those type of movies that, would have the opportunity to be at least considered for an Oscar because they have something to tell. The Get Out and the Hereditary, those kind of great horror movies. And as people that have been listening to the show for a long time, I'm a huge horror fan. And I want all types of horror movies. Because like Final Destination Bloodlines shows that there's also a place for those type of horror movies, as it's in the top 10 right now. Though from what I've heard, this movie it has more to say than just its kills. It's sort of talking, I think, a bit about that idea of survivor's guilt and working through grief. And this one with the bloodlines, the idea being the fact that someone survived many decades ago, and now death is catching up with sort of that lineage, with people who are the sort of the people that the children of the survivors, and sort of that legacy, the bloodline, as you would say, as I stumble over my words. And so, yeah, I'm happy to see something like that do well too, and I want all types of horror movies to do well, but I really do want original stories to do well. And I mean, Mickey 17 didn't do horribly. It's in the top 20. It's the 13th highest grossing domestic movie, 46 million. The dialogue around that is that it was a box office disappointment. So that might be a case of sort of budget and stuff, but at least it's something that performed at some level. Maybe you wish it to perform a bit better based off probably its budget. A movie that I don't even really know. One of Them Days, which is sort of a comedy, sort of a road trip movie with best friends. It came out in January, and it is in the top 20. So that's always fun to see. A comedy still doing okay in the box office. It made 50 million, and it's the 12th highest grossing movie of the year. So I think that's interesting too. Now, I want to look ahead a little bit, or not just necessarily look ahead, but look at 2025 and sort of the movies I'm looking forward to seeing, but also, as I've already confessed, I'm way behind on watching 2025 movies. And so I sort of want to quickly look at sort of the 2025 movies that I feel like I really need to review and catch up on. I know that Wolfman didn't necessarily review great, but I think still the pedigree behind that movie, and once again it being like a horror movie, a picture that sort of I believe Lee Whannell Yeah, he directed this picture and wrote the screenplay. I sort of want to see everything that Lee Wannell does because I think he's just a terrific creator, filmmaker. And then Julia Garner, someone who I've really enjoyed. I loved her in The Americans, one of my all-time favorite TV series. And so her being in the lead role, Wolfman, despite maybe it not being a massive critical darling, is still something I want to sort of track down and figure out what my own thoughts are on it. Another movie that didn't necessarily get great critical response and looks absolutely ridiculous, and that's why I kind of want to see it, is Flight Risk with Mark Wahlberg playing an assassin who is balding. We all need more balding assassins. Topher Grace is in it, who I feel is a lot better than maybe what his reputation is in certain circles. I always like sort of a very kind of closeted, closed space thriller, and so that's something I would like to catch up on. Compliant, which is the latest in sort of the evil AI movies. Reminds me a bit of a Megan, but this is a bit different, where I think I said Compliant. I should have said Companion, because that's what it's called. I should call it what its actual title is, Companion, where basically it's like an AI girlfriend that doesn't know that she's an AI girlfriend and is being treated poorly, and then realizes what she is and seeks out for revenge. So very kind of Megan-ish, but it looks campy. It looks like it's aware of what it is. Hard Eyes, sort of a rom-com slasher. I have a soft spot for slashers. I grew up in the 80s, and so I'm well aware of what slashers are. Halloween is still one of my all-time favorite movies, as well as Scream. And this looks like one that's sort of done in a different way, so that's definitely one I want to catch up on. I definitely have to catch up on Paddington in Peru, because the first two Paddington movies are two of the best family movies of all time. And Paddington in Peru is supposedly just as adorable. And then we've got another horror movie that I'm really interested that I missed, and that is The Monkey. Part of that is it's based off a Stephen King short story that I really like, but another major reason is it was directed by Oz Perkins, who did the really awesome Longlegs from last year, which is one of my favorite movies I saw last year. I thought it was a terrific horror movie, and so I'm interested to see sort of his mix of kind of dark humor with apparently there's some great gory kills and some great scares, and so that's definitely one that I'm really interested in. I mentioned Mickey 17 being a bit of a disappointment, but I still very much want to see this. This was one of my most anticipated movies, and I love everything that Bong Joon-ho has done, so there's no reason to not track this one down, hopefully, and be able to see it before I do my end of the year. And obviously, I'm not going to be able to do a mid-year because I haven't seen anything yet. So the traditional sort of best of the mid-year will not be happening. But hopefully, I'll catch up on enough movies to be able to do a really solid end of the year type show. Steven Soderbergh obviously gave us another thriller in Black Bag. I know very little bit about it, but I like his thrillers, and so that's one that obviously I have my eyes on. Grew up loving the Looney Tunes, and so I definitely want to see The Day the Earth Blew Up with some traditional animation. That's a great thing to see. So that's very much high on the list of pictures that I want to see this year, that I want to track down, that I haven't seen yet. That's an important one. Drop is sort of a thriller where a woman is going on a date, and then she's getting texts from someone who's basically threatening, I think it's like the babysitter and her daughter at home. And so she has to go through this date while trying to figure out who this killer is. That's right up my bag on the type of movies that kind of connect with me. Sinners would be another one that I'm very much interested in seeing. Already talked about it a bit. Ryan Coogler's vampire movie, The Wedding Banquet, which is a remake on an Ang Lee picture. Interested in seeing that, where basically it is a gay man who has to pretend that he is getting married to a woman to appease his family from back in in Asia. I think it might be China, Hong Kong, and wants to essentially convince them that he's not gay, and so that he doesn't get pulled out of America. And the woman that he is saying he's going to marry, she's trying to get, I think it would be sort of a green card so that she can stay in America too. The first movie is considered sort of an independent movie classic. It's what launched kind of Ang Lee's career, and this one looks just as interesting and got some decent reviews, so that's obviously something I want to track down. I'm also intrigued to see A24's version of sort of a family movie and Legend of Achi. They have a smaller budget, but the little creature, the little almost like gremlin looking like creature, mogwai looking creature, I think is one of the better looking believable creatures in sort of this CGI era where there's so many creatures that look like they're from a video game. This one actually looks like it's got some weight and looks interesting. Want to see Thunderbolts. Basically, hearing good things about it, and obviously it being a big blockbuster, I should definitely see that so I can be sort of part of the conversation. And speaking of being part of the conversation, gotta see Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. I love the Mission Impossible movies. They're probably my favorite action series of all time. Well, rivaled maybe with John Wick. And I definitely want to see the previous movie sort of first, Mission Impossible Reckoning, write a review of that, and then this one being the direct follow-up. Then I'll watch this one and have reviews for both of those. Final Destination, always have enjoyed that franchise. And Bloodlines looks really interesting, so that's another one that's on there. I'll probably watch Lilo and Stitch with my daughter at some point, so that'd be another one I got to review. I would love to maybe go through all the Karate Kid movies again, and maybe even review Cobra Kai, and then review Karate Kid Legends. Not sure if I'll be able to get in all the Karate Kid movies this year with all the different things I want to do, all the different projects that I want to finally get going, but it's, a man could dream. But I definitely should catch up on Karate Kid Legends because I'm a big Karate Kid fan. Ballerina. I've already spoke how I really like John Wick, and so I would definitely like to check that one out. Heard sort of decent reviews of that one, and so definitely something that is worth tracking down and seeing. Ana de Mas is someone who I have. Ana de Amas is someone who I've always really enjoyed as an actor. I think she is definitely one of the big stars of recent times, and I would look forward to see what she would do in an action movie in the John Wick world. So that is definitely something that I need to track down as well. Life of Chuck is a really great novella by Stephen King. I honestly am like, if you look at a lot of the Stephen King works, I'm like, that's one that I don't think would translate well to a movie, but it's got really good reviews, and it definitely would be a very experimental picture. It's basically done in kind of three different parts, and so you're not necessarily going to have a clear star if you're following the novella because it's different characters almost in each segment. But I am very intrigued on sort of how they adapt the Life of Chuck, because that's something that, again, I said I really enjoyed. Now we're looking ahead to movies that are still coming. What are things I'm looking forward to 28 years later? I was not initially looking forward to that. I felt like 28 days later, it gave me my zombie fix. I think it's one of the best zombie movies. 28 weeks later, it's been a long time since I've seen that one, but I remember being disappointed about it. But I've seen the trailers for 20 years later. Danny Boyle's behind it, so there's a lot of reasons to be excited about that. As you know, I will always be down with a Pixar movie. I haven't really seen a lot of trailers and promotion for Elio, but it's a Pixar movie, so I'm obviously very interested in that. I am not a race car guy at all. I'm not a car guy at all. But F1 the movie, I've liked a lot of racing movies. I think they are sometimes some of the most captivating stuff on the big screen. And just when they're directed well, I think they are really fascinating movies. And I loved Ford versus Ferrari. I was a huge fan of Rush, and this is being directed by the man who gave us Top Gun Maverick in Joe Kosinski. And I have every faith when it comes to sort of doing a big kind of spectacle visual picture for the big screen. I think his F1 movie will be really fascinating. I don't really think we need a sequel to Megan, but we're getting one. And I didn't like the trailers. And so I think they might be going a different approach with this. I think they're leaning a bit more on the camp, make it a bit more silly. So, I mean, we'll give it a shot. We'll see where it's going. Superman. I am looking forward to this movie because I enjoy all James Gunn movies. And initially I was like, I'm sort of kind of done a lot of superhero movies. And so when I first heard about sort of rebooting the whole DC universe of cinema, I rolled my eyes saying we don't really need this. We don't need any more interconnected cinematic universe movies. I feel like Marvel has really dropped the ball on that, and it's no longer really that interesting how they're connecting the movies. I feel like we get a bunch of stingers, end credit scenes that absolutely go nowhere, and I just find it's a bit of a mess. And so I'm sort of done on seeing the MCU as a big connected world, and just kind of we'll see what each individual movie's like. And so I'm not really interested in DC going in that direction. But the trailers for Superman look really intriguing. It looks like we're not going to get bogged down with an origin story, and there might be a little bit of that, but it seems like they're really jumping into sort of looking at sort of some meaty things and where Superman's place in the world and the people he's trying to protect are pushing against him. So I'm intrigued where it's going, but it also has like crypto. It has like Superman has a dog, and so it looks like it's also not afraid of being kind of fun and weird and quirky. So those are all the things that I'm interested in. I was not really interested in Fantastic Four, again, being sort of tired of comic book movies, but I really liked the last trailer. I like the aesthetic. I like the fact that it's considered into sort of an alternate world, alternate version of like, I think like the 1950s, like the 1950s with a futuristic take. All that stuff is interesting to me. And so I am a lot more interested in the picture than I thought before I started seeing the trailers and all that type of stuff. And so that's interesting. Kind of just looking. Oh, speaking of Stephen King, as I'm just sort of looking through movies that are being released, another one that I'm really interested to see is The Long Walk. This was a Richard Bachman book under Stephen King's pseudonym. And it's an interesting dystopian tale. It's kind of like Hunger Games, but it came out like 30 years before Hunger Games came out. This idea of this dystopian world and sort of this one world kind of government, and they do a game where basically teenagers have to basically do a long walk, and the moment they tire out, they get shot and killed. And so it's a really intriguing, dark book, and I think it could make into a really interesting movie. I don't know much about him, but it's sort of about a football player who wants to achieve success, and he may make some questionable sacrifices to get there. It's very much a horror movie. I believe Jordan Peele is attached as a producer in some way, and so that's enough for me to be kind of interested in where they're going with this. And I always like sort of an original story, and it's kind of an original dark horror tale, maybe a bit of a monkey paw thing of what do you sacrifice for success. And so obviously that type of thing is always going to intrigue me. It's in September, so when it's getting a little bit closer to the Halloween season, so that's something that I've got my eyes on. Talking about a biopic, The Smashing Machine, Dwayne Johnson sort of doing his first in a while, obviously like a bid for an Oscar. And so intrigued to see. I think he does a really good job of looking like Mark Kerr. Mark Kerr was a UFC fighter in sort of the early ages, and he definitely transforms into him, and that's what the Academy likes. And so he may have a shot there. It's an interesting story. Mark Kerr is a very interesting character, sort of the up and downs of his career. So I think this could have the potential of being a cool biopic. And you've got a pretty solid director in Benny Sadfi, who did like Uncut Gems and some of those incredible pictures. So I'm interested to see what he is going to do with The Smashing Machine. I think this is definitely one you don't want to sleep on. It's got a lot of potential. I'm going to say that I am interested in Tron, even if the sequel was more sort of flash and visuals rather than a really intriguing story. Tron Ares, I think, has potential to be interesting. Joachim Renning is directing this one. He did Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, which I wasn't all that excited about. He also did Maleficent, another one that I wasn't really all that interested about, but I want to give this a shot. I'm interested in seeing why they're returning to the Tron world, and I'm sure the visuals will be really interesting, and so we'll put that on something that I'm happy to do. I'm kind of just looking at things, going down a list of movies coming out, and Kiss of the Spider Woman, I've not even heard of this. Apparently it's starring Jennifer Lopez, but I'm always interested in just that title. Makes me sound like it's kind of a thriller, and so I probably can't really put it on my list of anticipated because I literally just saw it right now. But I like Jennifer Lopez. I've liked most of the movies that she's been in. Huge fan of Hustlers from a few years ago. I thought that was just a terrific kind of thriller drama movie about strippers that kind of are trying to pull off sort of a heist type thing. The cast of this looks pretty good, but I have no idea what it is. I just kind of learned about it today. So there we go as I go down there. I don't really know what I feel about Black Phone 2. It's kind of like Megan. I loved the first Black Phone. I think it's an absolutely fantastic horror movie, but I also think it's a movie that didn't really open itself up for a sequel, but it did. And I saw the trailer and I did like it. It looks like the killer from the first one somehow has come back from the dead. And it does definitely look like they are trying something different. It's not just the first one all over again. It's not just a boy gets trapped and put in the basement. It looks like they are going in a new direction with it, making it more sort of maybe delving a bit more into the supernatural elements of that picture, so of the original. So I'm interested to see where it's going. Predator Badlands is definitely on my list because I thought Prey was amazing, and we've got the same director behind this one. He delivered it totally with Prey. I thought that's one of the best Predator movies, and so I am willing to give this one a chance as well and see where they're going to go with Predator Badlands. This one looks like, I think it's kind of in the future now rather than in the past. Ellie Fanning is in it, and I'm hearing that there's a bigger focus on kind of the Predator itself as the lead character. Very, 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 very down with the Running Man. They are doing, this is another Bachman book, and it is a great Stephen King book, but not only that, am I interested in them see, like, apparently this version of Running Man is going to be less like the Schwarzenegger version, which is a great action picture, and this is going to be more of the thriller element, more just the average guy trying to survive in the city and avoiding the hunters that are pursuing him. And so I'm intrigued in that, but another big reason I'm intrigued in it is it's being directed by Edgar Wright, who, did the excellent Baby Driver and Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. And here's a guy who's just delivered great movie after great movie, and I'm intrigued to see what he will do as a great visual director for The Running Man. So that's very much on my list of stuff. I still need to see Wicked from last year, but I will be more than happy to watch Wicked from last year and then the second half of Wicked. Zootopia 2. I love Zootopia. It was one of my favorite movies of the year it came out. I think it came out the same year as Moana, so you got two great animated movies that year, and there's no reason not to love Zootopia 2. I think it will be fantastic. Just quickly looking to see, Avatar. Obviously, I really like the last Avatar, and so I'm interested to see what they're doing with Avatar, Fire and Ash, and obviously there'll be a lot of other stuff. That's just the stuff that kind of jumped out at me, but I'm excited, and the plan now is to review a new movie, at least one new movie every week, new release in the theater, while on top of that, catching up on all the stuff that I've missed. And if there is a movie that I've missed that you really want to hear my thoughts on, please shout out to me. You can contact me at themoviebreakdown@gmail.com or over on social media. And you don't just have to do it on the Breakdown account. You can do it on my social media accounts. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and just send out and say, hey, you really have to see this movie because, I like movies. And so let's make sure I track them all down and get some great reviews going. I was talking about how I've always sort of wanted this to be more than just a movie review show. Like when me and Scott review movies, we talk about themes, and we've talked about politics, we've talked about social issues, but we've also delved into our mental health. And so one of the big things that I do want to lean in more about this show and my writing is sort of my neurodivergence, because I've written a lot about my journey of finding out that I'm autistic and ADHD this year, and it seems to really have connected on social media and on the site. Now, I just don't want to write about that. I want to start writing about movies and pop culture again, but through maybe the lens of just realizing who I am. And it's interesting. I think I talked about it a bit on the previous show, but I was going through with my therapist, and it's very clear before I even knew my diagnosis that there is clear signs of me being autistic and me being ADHD, me being neurodivergent because of the way that I wrote. Part of it is that idea of catching patterns that people may miss, or sort of projecting yourself into a lot of kind of your writing and sort of the personal feelings when it comes to sort of analyzing art is a very sort of neurodivergent trait, and that is throughout my writing. But another big thing has been my attachment to sort of the outsiders, and realizing now that a lot of the movies I'm drawn to often are sort of about that person who doesn't feel like he's quite fitting in, or that person who is trying to make sense of the world. And I think that is a thing that I'm deeply attached to. Like we mentioned Karate Kid already, and I think one of the big reasons why I've always really liked Karate Kid is it's a guy who's moved in to the other side of the country. He doesn't know anybody. He doesn't really know his place. And it isn't until he finds sort of Mr. Miyagi where he feels kind of a sense of belonging and acceptance. And Mr. Miyagi himself being an immigrant, someone who isn't quite understanding his place in the world. And these two come together and they lift each other up and they kind of make a home for each other. And that, I think, has always been a big thing for me, because it's always that idea of not always quite understanding relationships, not often understanding how close I am with somebody, and often feeling awkward. And so I've always been drawn to sort of those type of movies. Back to the Future with its 40th anniversary. You've got a guy who's literally in the wrong time. He's trying to make sense of the 1950s. He does not fit there, while trying to sort of correct things and trying to make things better and fix relationships. And those things always are something that I attach to. I think that's a big reason why I've always liked coming of age stories, and kind of high school movies, because the character is always in a place of trying to figure himself out and trying to find out where he fits in the world. And that's where I've always connected to that. Something that I want to explore, I'm probably going to try to write an article about it for one of the bigger publications, is sort of Hollywood's idea of the outsider. I've always found that kind of fascinating, because often, like, the outsider who doesn't have to change he's always the one, he's like riding a motorcycle and he's got the leather jacket. It's the idea that he's an outsider, but he really is kind of cool, and he's projecting that coolness and that sort of I'm going to be myself type thing. He's an outsider in a world of squares, and so it's sort of that cool thing and something you get attached to. And when the outsider is sort of the nerd, or is coded in sort of neurodivergence, the story is often about them becoming cooler by the end and almost sort of fixing themselves. This idea that the nerdiness is something that has to be kind of cured so that they can eventually be accepted in the world. Because I think even something like Harry Potter, there's a bit of this idea of him being kind of nerdy and not quite fitting with his family, but then you realize like he's really good at sports, and when he comes into the wizarding world, everyone thinks he is the coolest thing. And so it's interesting that Hollywood seems to always need to put in a coolness when it comes to sort of the nerdy character. He needs to get the girl at the end, and he needs to they need to basically at some point become cool and become sort of not who they are anymore. And I think that is something that Hollywood really needs to sort of fix, because there is characters that I have connected to, but at the end when they become sort of this, they're the cool person, like they haven't really won until they've truly sort of won everyone over and fit into the world with something, again, like something like a Karate Kid, though I think the best parts of Karate Kid are more about the relationships he builds to, rather than maybe him winning the big term in the end. But I think there is sort of value in having it where we have sort of that outsider character, where in the end you can still have those happy endings, you can have those victories, but have them victorious through who they really are, through that neurodivergence coding and that quirkiness and that weirdness. And I mean, there is examples of movies that have kind of kept that formula. Something like a Napoleon Dynamite, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but Napoleon is still Napoleon at the end of the movie. He doesn't really transform. He's still Napoleon at the end, even though he gets his moment of victory. MLA, same thing. She is socially awkward. There's definitely some neurodivergent coding in her, and she is still who she is by the end of the movie. And so there is kind of examples of that. And it's just an interesting thing. I want to explore that a bit more. I might look at different movies, explore the idea of... might do a podcast where I look at different kind of movies of sort of the outsider characters and what their arc is and what Hollywood is saying about that. Well, also, I'll probably write an article about that too. But just something that I'm sort of intrigued in. And yeah, and I think one of the things that I've also kind of realized, again, with my neurodivergence and sort of my storytelling reviewing, is realizing that sort of I want to lean into sort of my uniqueness and sort of who I am, and kind of use the podcast and my writing as a way to, I guess, sort of unmask and just sort of really be more sincere and honest in how I see kind of stories and characters and movies differently, and lean into that and hopefully add a different voice. And I've said before, my main goal of this show and site is for this to be kind of a safe place, for this to be a place that's open-minded, and for people to feel accepted, and to really lean into sort of my ways of seeing things different and offering different perspectives. So I just want to thank you for listening to this show. I think I've definitely gone on long enough, and the plan is to really try to get this back to being weekly. And next week I'm really hoping to have a review of Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul, and at least have one of my kids kind of review it with me, where we can discuss that. And I might try to do a catch up on a few other 2025 movies next week, and maybe throw in a new release as well. Let me see. So if I did do a new release, looking right now at the handy schedule, I'm sure this makes for great podcasting. My ums and ahs, I'm just sure you absolutely love it. That would mean actually 28 years later. Maybe I'll try to review 28 years later, or Elio, a Pixar movie, for next week as well. We'll see how that goes. And so once again, I will give you a question of the week. And that is, what is the movie that turned you into a movie fan? What is that movie you saw in the theater that made you believe in movie magic? So it would be that childhood movie that, it doesn't have to be your favorite movie, but what is the movie that you realized, I love movies? You can give me that answer. You can also give me recommendations for movies I need to catch up on for this year. You can contact me at themoviebreakdown@gmail.com. You can also contact me at ChristopherDSpicer@gmail.com, especially if it's sort of you want me to write something on Beyond the Balcony, a written review. But I could do a written review and the podcast. I'm also on Twitter at Movie Breakdown 1, Facebook at the Movie Breakdown page. I also have a Beyond the Balcony page that you can check out, the website. And if you want to help us out, you can do that by subscribing and rating us on Spreaker, Spotify, Castbox, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. Don't go to Animal Music, because that's something completely different. And wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, it'd be awesome if you listen to us on the Spreaker app, because it helps us out. And please share us on social media if you really enjoyed the show. That would be great. And of course, don't forget my website, Beyond the Balcony. You can check me out there on beyondthebalcony.com. And there's a lot of different things that are on there right now that you can check out. Like I've said, I haven't really done any movie reviews. A lot of pop culture this year. A lot of it is sort of about neurodivergence or small little pieces. But I recently wrote about 17 years of marriage and learning that I'm neurodivergent and my wife is neurotypical, and sort of what that's meant, and learning about that as well. I did a mental health manifesto, sort of how my plans of going forward with neurodivergence, and looking back at my depression and what my goals are of being sort of a healthier, more balanced person going forward emotionally. That's a pretty vulnerable piece, so you might want to be interested in that. But once again, I shall be back next week, and every week after that. We're going to get this thing rolling and rocking. Thank you for being such loyal listeners, and I apologize for sort of the kind of sketchy output over the last several years, but we're going to get back on track. Should have a movie review for you next week, at least Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul, and maybe a new release too. So this is the Movie Breakdown. I'm Christopher Spicer. Thank you for listening to me, and have a great week at the movies.